Hi and good afternoon, everybody. My name is Maxine Stanley, and I'm from SAP Concur. Thank you for spending the next hour with me this afternoon as I talk about managing your spend. And managing spend is a necessary process and is a required part of doing business. However, for many organizations, it's really seen as a chore, and it can create frustration and distraction instead of providing real business value. We talk to many businesses very similar to yours and many individuals just like you who all face the same question. How can we get better control over this mandatory but non-mission critical business function? Employee controlled spend is a massive budget line item that can have a huge impact on your P&L, either positively or negatively. There is spend happening everywhere, but if you're like most businesses, understanding where, when, and how that money is spent is nearly impossible. We have found that the vast majority of organizations are making important business decisions with incomplete spend information. And when you consider all of the departments across your organization, from finance, travel, HR, legal, compliance, that are consistently adding new layer upon layer of new complexity on how to manage expenses, the whole process only gets more complex and costly. A focus on automating process, systems, and workflows, and the conclusion that most companies is the conclusion that most companies arrive at. And automation is really a great first step, but automation alone isn't the answer. You may be partially automated, but are you optimized? If the systems are not talking to each other, the problem doesn't go away. There's limited integration and insight of data. Automation addresses only part of the program. So when it comes to managing spend, things have changed and it has made the business challenge much bigger. And this is being repeated in many ways. A common problem. You may be partially automated, but are you optimized? If the systems aren't talking to each other, the data isn't being captured. And like I said before, the problem doesn't go away. There are 3 simple examples of missing data impact on spend: hotel leakage, ancillary fees, and air compliance. A focus on automation ignores foundational changes in technology and buying behavior. Technology, mobile computing, social media, how we think about commerce in general have all fundamentally changed on how employees spend. To be fair, these trends and innovations have changed a number of things in both business and in our personal lives. If we think about books, movies, banking, retail, communication, all of these things have been changed forever and will never go back to a model that existed before. So what effects do these changes have on how you manage spending within your business? So first of all, the demographics of your employees are changing. These employees are finicky. They have grown up in a digital world. They rely on and expect a digital experience customized for them and available through a myriad of apps that they choose from. And secondly, suppliers. They are marketing differently and using all forms of media, using mobility, using everything that they can get their hands on to have relationships with your employees without you being involved. Suppliers are looking for new channels to sell their goods and services, and all of this is disrupting your traditional procurement-driven supply chain. So although you create spending policy, the actual decision to spend the money is left with the employee. When that spend happens, employees are caught in a world where your policy collides with their expectations and their preferences on how and when to buy. Suppliers, vendors, banks, retailers, hotels, airlines, even coffee shops are getting increasingly adept to knowing how to increase their chances that your employees spend more money, and how by knowing their behaviors, and are using new channels to reach them. So if you focus on automation alone, you will ignore how businesses spending actually is happening today. Your spend data is all over the place in many different systems, in many different departments. When you take inventory of how you're currently managing spend today, there are likely points along the way that require manual intervention, and that they could benefit from a much tighter integration. However, there is a way forward, and solving this problem requires looking at things differently. Businesses are finding a way to address this problem by connecting their systems and process, looking at both components. And as a result, at Concur, we approach this specific problem from a holistic, connective perspective. And so what does that all mean for you? And more importantly, why should you care? Concur solution is the only way you can manage spending wherever it happens, whenever it happens. The Concur solution is the only way you can get the accurate and timely look into your spending data so you can get control of what is actually being spent. It is the only way you can tackle the issues you're facing today and prepare yourself for the changes in how your business manages its expenses tomorrow. It's important because the only way you can manage all of your spending is to connect all of your spending. Let me explain. There's power in a single source of data. Imagine if you could access unique streams of trusted data, centralize it, normalize, and cleanse it, rather than duplicating work, replicating data, and building separate databases for travel, expense, invoicing process, duty of care, and auditing. All of these functions could work from the same timely data set. And you can find all of these solutions or a version of them from virtually any company. But if you look at them in isolation, you wind up with a disconnected system and disconnected data. So the Concur platform consolidates all of your spend data, including travel, expense, and invoice, into a single source where you can make smarter financial decisions. Our platform also uses APIs to allow third-party apps, as well as our own extended services, to integrate and enhance this core. The connected approach is the only way you can manage spend before it happens, wherever it happens, and deliver an effortless user experience and provides transparency into every penny that you spend. The best long-term solutions are in the cloud. The mobile revolution is just beginning. Social principles can make a real impact in business. Information is power, and big data is superpower. These three key mandates are inherent to everything that we offer, everything that we do, and everything that we believe in. You cannot work if you're not connected. Concur is the only way for you to connect all of your people and every dollar spent. Think of that for a second. There's no other way outside your solution to connect expense, credit card, and invoice spending data. There's no other way to integrate spending data from your systems, your partners, and suppliers. So for example, if you have a hotel that is booked on Expedia and not on your booking system, we can actually bring that data in and keep you in touch. No matter how many employees, no matter how many travelers, no matter how big or small your business is. You can't control spending if it isn't transparent. How are you supposed to make an educated budget decision, even something as simple as approving a client dinner, if you can't see who spent what or where? Or more likely, if you're still waiting for last month's expense report to determine where you sit this month. Our solution is transparent so you can see what you need to see from every itinerary, every traveler, to each invoice that comes in. So you'll actually know if a flight that's about to be booked fits into your corporate policy. And if it doesn't, you can ask that flyer to start over again. This transparency allows you to make decisions about what you're spending before the money is gone. It's that simple and it's that smart. the part of the workday won't get worked on unless it's effortless. And let's face it, it's difficult enough to get people to do what you pay them to do. And when you pile on process, the actual less work gets done. The Concur solution makes the travel and expending process work without all the work. It makes managing details effortless for your company, your team, and it makes it easier for everyone to manage their spending. And now what I'm going to do is take you through a very quick walkthrough demo of our travel and expense platform and show you how the two are integrated together. So whatever you can do on a desktop, you can actually do on your mobile. So you'll see to the right of the screen an actual image of what the mobile application would look like. So, like any application, you would begin by logging in, and from there it will take you to the task dashboard. So at the top, beside the Concur logo, you'll see travel, expense, invoice, approvals, reporting. And these are all of the different functions and tabs within Concur. You will see also that in this case, this person has 0 approvals to be done. There are 35 expenses that need to be submitted into a report. However, there are no open reports available. To the left, you will see trip search data. So that is if they were looking to book travel. For some organizations, they may want to have their travelers request booking before they actually go ahead and actually make the booking. And so that functionality does exist in Concur. It's called request, and you can actually go ahead and ensure that the traveler is going to be booking within policy. It can be approved by the approver, and then the actual booking can be made. So once request is an optional feature for many organizations. They just have their travelers book. So in this case, we are booking a flight from Vancouver to Calgary, it looks like. We've also selected that we need a car, and we've also selected that we need a hotel. So when we look at our flights, we see that because we're in Canada, we have a couple of options, Air Canada and WestJet. There's nonstop and one stop, and it'll give you in a matrix all of the results. From there, you can go and pick the flight that works for you, whether it be based on preferred airline or preferred timing of departure and arrival. And so we've chosen a flight through Air Canada that leaves at 11 o'clock in the morning, arrives in at 1:30 in the afternoon. And then it also gives me my fare option. So in Canada, the airlines are really good at all of these branded fares. Air Canada is no exception to that rule, and so if it's within policy, a traveler could choose flex faring or latitude faring or many different options, and if everything was fine and it was in policy, at the bottom here you would see a green check mark. Okay, so this particular fare is within policy. We've got a green check mark, so the traveler can move forward. The next thing we want to do is we actually want to book a hotel. So we can book a hotel based on the parameters of what we put in, whether it be close to the company meeting or close to the airport, whatever those parameters are. So we put in the hotel, and then we get a drop-down menu. The hotels typically are based on preferred rates that have been negotiated between your company and the travel management company that you work with. And so all of those pre-negotiated rates are actually loaded into Concur, and then the employee or the traveler can actually select from there. You'll see that the second one here for the Holiday Inn Express Northwest is not allowed. And if you were to click on that, the reason you would see that is because it was a prepaid suite. And so in our policy, because this is a screenshot of our policy, we do not allow for prepaid hotel rooms. Okay. Once again, everything that you do on the desktop, you'll see over to the right, you can also do on the mobile. So you'll see here that we've chosen the Holiday Inn, Calgary McLeod Trail South. We've got 2 green check marks, and then we've got an icon that is a yellow triangle, and then we've got a do not allowed. So we could choose any one of the 2 green check marks based on the pre-negotiated rates. You would have to have an exception if you wanted to choose one of the yellow triangles, and the red icon, not allowed, you wouldn't even be able to book it. So if you were going to do an exception, if you had in a hotel that was not in compliance, you would need to choose what the travel rule was. In some cases, a travel rule could be, preferred hotel is where conferences, or staying with another guest, and this is their hotel of choice. So these fields are very customizable, and when Concur Travel is being set up during implementation, we would put all of those policies and all of those fields and reasoning into the setup. What really stands us apart from our competition out there on the online booking tools is that we have the ability to have our e-receipts flow directly into our expense reports. And why this is really, really important is, that folio, that hotel folio that you get at the end of a travel session is probably one of the most painful things to enter into an expense report. And what most people do, and I'm hopefully some of you are shaking your head on the call, is that they just, their travelers just actually put one line item, so their entire hotel bill into the expense report. And what that does is it provides, a great lack of visibility into what the actual hotel cost was. Did that traveler, have internet, and was that charged for? Is internet another line item on the expense report, and so therefore the traveler is actually double dipping? Was the traveler renting in-room movies or taking from the minibar? Typically, those are 2 features when you're traveling that go without without the travel policy or go against the travel policy. So with an e-receipt, we are able to showcase a line by line exactly what are the expenditures during that hotel stay, and that those line by line items will flow directly into the expense report, so the traveler doesn't have to go in and actually put in what those expenses were. And you can see that here. So we've got this Starwood e-folio receipt from the Westin in Edmonton, and then everything has gone through into the expense report. So including the hotel tax, if there was internet, that's been captured, as well as any business meals as well. I mentioned at the very beginning that there will be cases where we will actually have travelers that don't want to book using the online booking tool. However, we still want that data. They may book on a supplier website, so like Air Canada or like SBG. We still want that data to flow from that supplier website into Concur Expense, so that you as the employer have full visibility into what that traveler's spend was. And so we have the ability to do that using TripLink. And 40 to 50% of employees' travel is actually booked outside corporate travel systems. And so things like airlines, so Air Canada, United, WestJet, even using other booking tools, so like Trivago, Expedia, hotels.com, and then suppliers like Avis, Via, Uber. We have Uber for Business now as one of our App Center partners, and then the hotel chains, so SVG, Airbnb, Hyatt, Marriott example. And so you could have theoretically, well, you could not theoretically, it's an actuality. You could have your travelers book outside of an online booking tool, but still have all of that expense flow into Concur using TripLink. And all we need is the loyalty card number in order for that to happen. And so here's how it works. So if there's no link available, the traveler is going to forward the reservation email to receipts@concur.com. Or if the account is linked using a loyalty number, that also will then flow directly into Concur. From there, we can see if the purchase of the hotel or the car rental is out of policy. And if it is, it will alert the manager. Or if it's approved, it will just automatically be approved. It will all flow through into the trip plans. And then from there, the data will flow into Concur. It's very seamless, very integrated. There's really nothing to be done other than ensuring that it's set up properly. And like I said, if there is no rewards, then it's just the matter of forwarding an email from the reservation to Concur. So once we've booked all of our travel, whether it be on the online booking tool or whether it be outside of the booking tool using something like TripLink, we then want to submit for our expenses. And so features of Concur Expense are the mobility. So we actually have mobile capability. E-receipts, so that's the OCR technology. That OCR is optical character recognition technology, where you take a picture of the receipt. What really sets us apart from our competitors is that location is really, really important. And the reason why we have to have location is to ensure that we actually capture the right amount of tax. So we are one of very few vendors that can actually capture the right amount of provincial sales tax, because as we all know, it varies from province to province. That's why location is so important. And then do the reclamation amount. We know that, for business meals, for example, reclamation is 50%. We know that non-for-profits, their tax implications are very different. And so we are probably, the administration behind Concur is far more robust than any of our competitors. Due to that fact alone, and that we take care of the taxes and the reclamation amounts depending on the industry or vertical, and as well as depending on the province, to ensure that you have accuracy and we mitigate that manual integration that you have to do. We also have card integration. So we have relationships with all of the commercial card companies within Canada. So RBC, Amex, for example, and we can do integration. I've talked about the tax management, and then we have full reporting. So, I mean, we have probably close to 100 different customizable reports that are included within the solution that you can slice and dice whatever way you need to get all the information that you need out of the solution. This may look familiar to most of you. About 90% of businesses today use a very manual process when it comes to submitting expense reports. Typically, it looks like a coffee-stained Excel spreadsheet. When I do these in front of live people, I usually get a couple of heads nodding in the audience. And usually it's got a sticky tab right on it saying, please approve urgently. Typically, this type of expense report from start to finish for the employee to recoup, any monies outlaid that they may have had to outlay takes about 3 to 4 weeks. There's monumentous back and forth between the employee to their approving manager, from the approving manager to AP, and then AP, back to the approving manager. Should there be questions? Typically there are. We typically see missing receipts in this scenario, and we see anywhere, about 20 to 30% leakage. And leakage is, fraudulent expenses, duplicate expenses, and so things like that. And that can be anywhere from fudging mileage, to inverting a number, maybe on accident or may not be on accident, taking advantage of a hotel stay and adding a few extra perks, as if you want to call them that, and then submitting one line item for hotel. So these things happen today, and we see about a 10% reduction of expense costs when a company actually starts to utilize our solution. So there is a real tangible ROI associated with expense. And once again, that's about a reduction in about 10% of what we see in costs over the course of a year when a company actually utilizes our expense solution. So once again, using that e-receipt, has flown directly through into Concur, our T&E, our travel and expense cloud-based solution. And once again, it's been itemized line by line so that the approver can actually ensure that all of these approvals are within policy and are to be paid. We have lots of App Center partners. They can be things like airline carriers and things like Uber, Airbnb. We also have App Center partners like VAT Reclaim. So for those of you that have organizations that perhaps do some international travel, that reclamation is probably one of the most manual processes that a company will have to do. And in fact, probably about 50 to 60% of companies don't even bother doing that reclamation because it is so manual and cumbersome. So when you utilize our expense solution, you can actually use one of our App Center partners. We have 3 that actually do VAT reclamation. And what they will do is they will actually go through your expense report and they will be able to pull out the amount of VAT that you can be reclaiming. I've seen some stats, and some dollar figures where companies were able to reclaim thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars on that reclamation just by using our App Center partners. And so it actually then pays for the Concur solution. The great thing about the VAT reclamation partners is there's no cost to set it up, and they just take a small percentage of what they actually claimed. So it's a fabulous partner that we have. And then we have partners like BAASS. BAASS is one of our premier partners that we work with that will do the integration for the ERP into one of the stages or the in-tax that you might be using. And so we'll be able to work with BAASS and we'll take the information from Concur into your ERP solution so that you don't have to do any of that manual data entry as well. if you look at the Uber for Business, just kind of going back to that, Uber for Business is a really interesting application because what it will do is it will actually track the route that the individual took, and then it'll put it right into Concur Expense. So there's no hiding behind, what an employee may have been doing during working hours. Once again, all of that will get uploaded into Concur, and then it's itemized as such. So this is a taxi shuttle train. That's the expense type. It'll put in the location. Once again, location is super, super important. And then if this was in the US dollars, it'll actually do a conversion for you. So 3206 US into Canadian becomes 41.52. And you can change the exchange rate. So I just came back from Seattle a couple of weeks ago. My on Concur, my hotel bill in Seattle, was off by $100 or so. So I just went into the app. I looked at what my Visa was actually charged, and then I just changed the rate according to that. And then I had the backup statement from my Visa to show Concur that this is an accurate amount. We also have card feed integration. So like I said before, we work with all the major commercial card feeds. What's really interesting with the card feed integration is it will actually show up in Concur as a source. So you'll see that green icon there. And then you'll actually get, in addition to the receipt, you'll actually get the integration feed that will come. So it's a double audit, so to speak, to ensure that the amount is correct going into Concur. And then we have the feature receipt, so the capture receipt. So many expense companies out there offer this. And there are some free versions. So my caution to you is do not base Concur, solely on this capture receipt and think that it does everything that everybody else does. What really sets Concur apart is the administration that goes behind everything that we do. Nonetheless, though, we're one of the only organizations that can take multiple captures and multiple receipts. You can add a comment to it. Once again, the accuracy on the OCR technology is about 96, 97%, so it's really good. I mean, OCR technology is quite complex and intricate. It will pick up the location again, which is super, super important for tax. Okay, and this is all done on the mobile application because it's obviously taking a picture of your receipt using your phone. You would put in what the comment is. It analyzes the receipt. It literally takes about 10 to 15 seconds for that to happen, and then it flows directly into Concur. And then it's showing up here. And then it actually will have a pop-up of the picture of the receipt. When you're submitting our expense report, so in this case, we've got 7 available expenses that need to be submitted. You would click on that expense report. You would import everything to the new report. You would name it, and then it would show up on a report. Really quickly, you would scan through to make sure that the expense types, make sense, and then you would hit submit. From there, it goes all the way through to a workflow approval process. You could have multiple approvers. You could have a single approver. You could have a workflow process that says, any expense type under $50 is automatically approved and doesn't require a receipt. So there are many, many options. We customize everything, and it really is dependent on your company policy and how you want Concur set up. And you'll see here that now it's been submitted. There are no available expenses to be done. Another feature within Concur is something called Drive. So mileage accounts for anywhere between 10 to 15% of fraudulent expenses. It's super, super easy for a salesperson on the road or a technician on the road to pad their mileage, particularly if, it's something that they do do every day, and so what is the harm in tacking on, 8, 9, 10 kilometers a day. Well, believe it or not, that adds up, and it really will, eat into your P&L. And so, as I said before, bringing on a solution like Concur Expense can reduce your expenses by about 10%, and definitely mileage, is a large contributor of that. And so there's a couple of options with mileage. One of them is to use a solution called Drive. And what Drive is it's a GPS enabled auto capturing mileage calculator. And so what it does is it will follow the route that the individual took. It can either be done user initiated or it can be done scheduled. So Monday through Friday, Monday through Thursday, whatever that person is driving. And it will then configure the exact route that that person took. It will follow it, and then it will spit the mileage into Concur. You can turn it off at any time. You can turn it back on at any time. What is great about mileage, particularly for those living in large metropolitan areas, we don't necessarily take a straight route, from point A to point B. Sometimes we have to get off of the highway, particularly if the 401 is, chock-a-block and we don't want to be sitting in traffic for hours on end. And so we might weave through the side streets. When you have Drive, that will follow you. And so it then takes the guesswork out of how many actual kilometers did that individual drive, and it gives you an actuality of what that is like. I was going to BAASS Connect in London, Ontario in November of last year, and there was actually an accident at Woodstock. And so I needed to get off the highway, and I got on Waze so that I could see another bypassed route. And I had Drive on as I was doing this, and it literally added probably 8 kilometers onto my drive. But if I didn't have Drive on, I would have been guesstimating, and I could have said, oh, that seems like maybe another 20 kilometers. Doesn't seem like a lot, but when you've got multiple salespeople and it's day in and day out, it can be quite costly to a company to not be able to actually have a line of sight into what their mileage looks like. If you've got a company and you don't want to have Drive, because it is an optional solution within Expense, you can then use a mileage calculator. We use Google Maps based on the desktop. And that will work as well. We talked about managing taxes, so I just want to go over this because I think it's a real differentiator between ourselves and our competitors in the marketplace. We are one of the only expense management companies out there today that will actually manage your Canadian taxes accurately and efficiently. And that all comes back to what's behind the hood of Concur and the administration flow and the workflow that we have put in place. So location is super important. So in this case, we have Calgary, Alberta. We all know that Alberta has no PST, just GST only. And so when we are looking at this business meal, we're going to take into the reclamation amount that that Alberta has in place, and we're only going to draw out of the GST if there is such, and there is. In this case, it's $3. When we look at the administrator's view, and we talk about tax again. Here's the ability to put in all of the tax authorities, the tax reclamation groups, so that you have full line of sight into what all of those taxes are, how they are named, and so that we can do all of the calculation on the back end. And here's all the reclamation groups as well that you can put in, from the finance team, whether it be a 50%, whether it be 100%. You would follow the rules of the law, based on accounting practices. And then we can also manage foreign exchange. As I mentioned before, you can actually take your foreign exchange, and if you need to, you can change that amount. We use a daily rate, but it it may not be accurate based on what has hit your credit card. So we want to make sure that you have the ability to change that should you have to. The workflow approval process, is quite simple. Once you hit approve, it will go to the person who needs to approve that. And then if there are exceptions, what that person now is doing is just managing those exceptions. So in this case, we've got 2 exceptions. We've got a dinner that is plus $35, which violates, in our case, our Concur travel and expense policy. So manager approval is required. And then we've also got another dinner that is, $150. Also, manager approval is required. So in this case, the manager has a couple of options. They can either punt the report back to the employee and say, I need you to change this, you're violating company policy. Or I need you to put a detailed explanation in and I will approve it. So there are a couple of different options, or the approver can just approve it. There is a full audit trail as well. So whenever I submit an expense report from Concur, I can see when my director has approved it. I can see when it's gone into the queue for audit. So we have a secondary audit component. And then from there, I can see where it's gone into the queue for payment and then when it's been paid. So I have full visibility into when I see from start to finish, from submission all the way through to payment of when that happens, and the time frame is about 5 business days. So some companies may be a lot shorter. We're just, a fairly large organization, so we're about 5 business days, but it's a heck of a lot shorter than in prior companies that I work with, where I had to use an Excel spreadsheet and I was getting paid out 3 to 4 weeks after the fact. And so to wrap it all up, how can Concur Expense help your organization? So first of all, we can give you visibility. So you don't know what you don't know, and you can't make decisions, if you don't have line of sight into your travel and expend as it happens. And so we can give you that with our travel and expense management solution. Productivity. So we can give back your employees' time. So the average time to actually submit an expense report is maybe, 5 to 10 minutes at most, versus on a manual process where it could be days, hours to do that. And so that's definitely a loss of productivity. And with this emerging workforce where you've got the Gen Zs and the millennial generation that are entrenched in the workforce, they're really used to using tools like Concur within the workforce to make their work life better, and they're looking for it. So it's important, from a work demographic perspective that we look at giving them those types of tools. And then lastly is control. So control over the ability to make informed decisions, control over the ability to look at your expenses and ensure that you have compliance, and control to minimize your risk. And risk, is looking at your business, 5 years in the future. Future proofing your business and making sure that you're set up for success today, so that you have the right process in place, so that 5 years from now, when you're at a different place within your business, you have the ability to see and know what your employees are spending. And so if you do have questions about Concur from an expense management solution, you can call me directly, maxine.stanley@sip.com, or you can reach out to your BAASS account manager and ask them to connect with myself, and happy to get you engaged with one of our Concur sales executives to help you work through what Concur Expense could look like for you within your organization. Are there any questions on the line?
Thanks, Maxine. So we have one question, and it is, what is the cost associated with Concur?
Great question, and thanks for answering that. So the cost is really by expense report, and I think a lot of people they get a little trepidatious when they think that the cost is going to be prohibitive because we have SAP in front of our name. The cost is really scaled to the economy of a scale to economy of the business. So it really depends on how many expense reports a business has. We see in some smaller companies that maybe have 10 expense reports a month, the cost is around $1,200 a year. And that's in Canadian dollars. So another one of our differentiators between ourselves and our competitors is that we charge in Canadian dollars, where we have some competitors out there that will say, it's $8 or $9 an expense report, but that's in U.S. funds. In some ways, we're actually less expensive than our competitor because we charge in Canadian dollars. And, to drive the point home again, we can do taxes, which I think is super, super important, for Canadian companies. Having, the ability to do that on a non-manual way and having it done automated is impressive and important.
Okay, perfect. If there are any other questions, please just type it into the question box. So someone asked if you could show an example of a resulting expense report showing taxes, and where does this happen and what does it look like?
Yep, so that is something that we would definitely do on a sales cycle with a solution consultant. So I can give you from a 30 view perspective. I showed you a couple of screenshots of behind the hood on the administration side. But if that's something that you would like to see more of, please reach out to me directly, maxine.stanley@sap.com. And then we can have you work with a solution consultant who could show you that piece of what you're looking for. The administration is probably the most important piece behind Concur, and so I want to make sure that you are engaged with the right person who can provide who has the technological expertise to show you what you're looking for.
Okay,
does that sound reasonable?
Yeah, I think that's good. And again, please do reach out to either Maxine or your BAASS account manager, and we can certainly take this conversation offline. So
yeah, absolutely.
Thank you very much, Maxine.
Thank you everybody for attending, and have a wonderful rest of your day.